All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. My name is Victoria Bray. I'm the Associate Director of Recruitment with the Division of Masters in Professional Programs at Brown University. We have a lot of really great information to share with you about our Master of Science in Sustainable Energy program here at Brown. So if we want to go to the next slide, we can go ahead and get started. So we're going to talk a little bit about a lot of things today. So we'll talk about the School of Engineering. We'll talk about the application process. We'll talk about the program, the structure, what sets Brown apart in the landscape of master's programs in the United States. We're here to answer your questions as well. We're going to use the Q&A feature on your Zoom toolbar to collect those questions, so submit them as they come. We'll answer them throughout the session, and then we'll leave time at the end for a Q&A. So that being said, I think we can go to the next slide, and I'll hand things over to Rod to introduce himself.
Thanks, Victoria. Hi, everybody. I'm Rod Beresford. I am the academic director of the Sustainable Energy SEM program. I'm a professor in the School of Engineering, an electrical engineer by training. I've done research in electronic devices and materials. I've also held a number of administrative roles in the School of Engineering and Brown University. I'm also happen to be a registered professional engineer in power engineering, and I had a special experience 20 year as a congressional fellow working on the U.S. Senate on the Energy and Natural Resources Committee, and that was kind of my pivot point into the policy space. And the program we're talking to you about today blends these two fields of engineering and policy. So you're seeing on this slide some views of our facilities in the School of Engineering. On the left is high bay shop space. That's a fantastic resource for not just the School of Engineering, but the Brown campus, and in fact, the broader community as well. This is open to all comers. We have student monitors and mentors who will train you on the various tools. You can come in here to prototype projects for your coursework, or it may be things you're working on for yourself. It's a fantastic community space with a lot of great resources. And you can see in the other pictures, students doing what they do. They love to study and convene. We have a great facility, finished in 2017, the Engineering Research Center, an $80 million project, which was new research labs as well as these teaching and community spaces. So if you come to Brown, you'll have a great experience academically as well as all these co-curricular and community spaces. I'll turn it back to Victoria for the moment and return to you all shortly to get into the program in more details.
Awesome. Thanks, Rod. So we can go to the next slide. And I want to talk a little bit about the application process for the Sustainable Energy program. So we have a holistic admission process, which means we look at all of the pieces of the application that you share with us. First and foremost is your transcript. We're going to require you to submit transcripts from every institution that you've attended after secondary school. So if you've transferred from one institution to another, or if you've attended multiple institutions and gotten multiple degrees, we want to see all of that coursework so that we can make sure that you have the prerequisite requirements and the academic background to be successful in the program. For the purposes of your application, you can submit an unofficial transcript. However, we will ask you to follow up with an official transcript by the time you matriculate if you're admitted to the program. Another note about your transcript, we have a lot of international students who are interested in the program who've attended institutions outside of the United States. For the purposes of your application, you won't be required to submit a credential evaluation from a credential evaluation company like WES, ECE, the evaluation company. However, you'll be required to submit that along with your degree conferral information upon matriculation if you're admitted. We were going to require 3 letters of recommendation in order for your application to be considered complete and ready to review. These letters of recommendation can come from either professional or academic sources. It's just really important to us that you choose folks who can speak to you positively as a member of the classroom or a member of a professional community. It's important to us to know more than just, this person did really well in my class, or, they were in the top 10% of the lecture that I taught. You should really choose folks who can speak to you specifically, can speak to your success in a graduate program, why they think that the master's degree is a good fit for you. We're going to ask you to submit a personal statement which outlines your interest in our specific master's program. Why are you interested in a master's program from Brown? Why specifically sustainable engineering? What do you hope to do with your master's degree? Really trying to get an understanding of your goals, to make sure that we're able to meet those goals, right? We want to make sure that we're putting you in the best position to be successful in the program. Your resume, which will outline your academic and your work experience. GRE is not required for the program. If you do sit for the exam, though, we do encourage you to submit those scores. We have two intakes for this program. So we have a spring intake and a fall intake. The dates that you see below outline the process for our next entry cohort, which is the spring entry cohort. You have up to 2 weeks after you submit your application, or after the application deadline, I should say, in order for your application to be complete. However, we cannot review or make decisions on applications that aren't complete. A big sticking point for folks can be the 3 letters of recommendation. So make sure that you're asking for those letters of recommendation early. Make sure you're asking for all 3 letters of recommendation, and make sure that you are kindly nudging your recommenders if you're seeing that they're still missing materials from your portal. If we want to go to the next slide, we can look at a high level sort of overview of the dates and deadlines. You'll notice that for international students, we have a divergent deadline. That's in order to accommodate the visa process, because this is an in-residence program. So if you are an international citizen and you're seeing different deadlines, it's really just truly because we want to give you enough time to be able to do all of the paperwork, to be successful in getting that visa so that you can attend the program in residence for spring. So if we want to go to the next slide, I will talk a little bit about the personal statement and letters of recommendation. We talked about this a bit before. I think a really important note here is this is an opportunity for you to show us your communication skills. It should be a highly polished document, the personal statement. It should really be you putting your best foot forward and showing us that you're ready for the level of professional writing and communication that we're going to require in a Brown master's program. It's also an opportunity for you to brag about yourself a little bit, right? Talk about your accomplishments, and then also talk about your goals, how you feel like your accomplishments and your goals fit in with Brown's Sustainable Engineering program. We want to hear about any past work experience that's relevant as well. Really just, it's a great opportunity for you to kind of sell yourself to the program, but then also talk a little bit about what you want to do in the future. Uh, for letters of recommendation, like we talked about, a lot of the students in this program are early career, so they're either newly graduated from college or they're 3 to 5 years out of college. We understand that depending on how far you are out from university, maybe you're switching careers, it might be more difficult to get 2 letters of recommendation from professors who've taught you in the classroom. So there's definitely some wiggle room there, but generally we look for 2 letters from somebody from academia and 1 professional letter of recommendation. So if we want to go to the next slide, program dates, like I said earlier, we have 2 intakes that we do for sustainable energy, 1 for spring and 1 for fall. The dates on the screen that you're seeing outline what the program dates will be for the spring semester. So the first day of spring classes will start on January 21st, and then the last day for commencement is going to be May 30th, just so you get a sense of sort of what that commitment looks like for that semester. And then if we want to go to the next slide, this outlines the same, but for fall. So this is the first day of classes. An important thing to talk about here is also we have orientation. So our expectation for students in the fall is that they're arriving to campus early so that they can participate in our all student orientation, which for some students, depending on which orientations they're participating in, might be 2 weeks before classes start. So then if we want to go to the next slide, I'll hand things over to Rod to talk more about the program.
Okay, thanks again, Victoria. And as you saw on the agenda, I plan to give you some details about the program structure and how we're organizing it, but I also want to share a little bit more about the context that we're operating in as a society and as a world, and the motivation for having this program in the first place. So many of you may have seen this graphic comes from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. To the left on this graph is our history, where we've been. That's essentially my lifetime, if you will. And you can see how mean temperatures on the Earth's surface have been steadily increasing. And the next piece of that, most of the rest of it, that's your lifetime, most likely. And the question is, are we going to be able to achieve that? You look at that sort of gray funnel, those are potential pathways for how that surface temperature might peak and then hopefully start decreasing. And behind this, of course, is the idea that we as a society, we as a globe, are going to decarbonize. And, we've already, let's say missed some goals. I mean, people are making a lot of progress. I'm sure you're aware that the recent political environment has changed significantly in the US. That's going to slow down some of this process, but not stop it. And I'm going to talk more about that. But this is our overall context, that there's a massive transition just underway. It's going to be going on for years and decades in our economy, in our society. So you want to be part of that. I think that's why you're here, why you're listening to us and thinking about this. Why should you do this at Brown? That's the next slide, please. We have a somewhat distinctive environment at Brown, in particular, the ability to bring people together across the disciplines. And what I'm showing with this little cartoon is at the bottom, this initiative for sustainable energy, relatively recent creation at Brown, consists of engineering faculty, other physical scientists like physics, chemistry, earth and planetary sciences, and the other groups at Brown that have been around longer, that are also deeply engaged in sustainability and decarbonization and policy. And for example, the Institute at Brown for Environment and Society, or IBES, is directed by Kim Cobb. And there's a whole group of environmental studies, environmental scientists, and various departments, social science departments at Brown that contribute to that. On the other side of the slide, the Watson School of International Public Affairs. These are political scientists, economists, and others. And included in their work is a focus on climate solutions and the geopolitics of energy. And so our goal's not just to push forward with technology solutions, which is the job of engineers, but to link with these other researchers and other practitioners in developing policy and seeing those policies enacted in society. So doing it at Brown means that you have this kind of rich interdisciplinary environment and a great opportunity to take advantage of the whole campus. Let's go to the next slide to talk a little bit more about our context. Again, some of you may be well aware of these things, some may be less so, but this is some of the recent history in terms of policy and legislation in this country. There's a huge amount of financial resources that recently were approved to really facilitate or catalyze this transition, that is, removing carbon from the electricity system and from the energy system generally. Let's go to the next slide, please. The IRA, which was passed in summer of 2022 in the Biden administration, provided a large amount of tax incentives and other grants to energy projects, and it had the effect of really leveraging a lot of private sector investment. And if you read this slide, you're just seeing some of the statistics from the first year of the IRA. Second year of the IRA was a continuation of that. Third year of the IRA is, as I was mentioning, pretty massive retrenchment under the Trump administration. A lot of these funds have been clawed back. A lot of these programs are being either frozen or retracted, rescinded. So yes, there are some delays and detours coming, but I think it's important to keep in mind that this is not stopping the transition. We have 50 state energy offices in this country. Many of these states are very far along in the transition. You'll see a little bit of data from California in a minute. So the demand that's been fostered for people who can plan, design, and deploy these systems, these are renewable energy systems integrated into our grids, is still growing. So let's go to the next slide. Here's a picture of one day from last year in California. This is the grid operator in California. And this was it's an interesting graph for a couple of reasons. The first one was if you look to the right there, this is at a certain evening hour, looks like maybe 10 p.m. or so, the peak off to the right there. This was the first time that battery storage was the largest single contributor to electricity supply in the California grid. And you can see all the other sources that are contributing. California has a very diverse energy mix. The big yellow blob in the middle, that of course is solar energy. California has built out huge amount of solar and more recently something like 6 gigawatts of battery storage. So solar plus battery is kind of the latest innovation, and it's allowing renewables to really, really advance. I think in 2025, California has already had something like 70 days where at least one of these times, like one of these hours in the day, was 100% renewable energy on the grid. And some days, of course, more than that. Excuse me. So it's really happening. If you look where California is today, other states will be there, in a couple of years, 5 years or 10 years. There's so much that can be done today. It is feasible. This is not a pipe dream. This is not some kind of, never to be realized dream. Let's go ahead to the next one. So where do we get the data and the sort of the perspective, the analysis that's going to allow us to study the energy system and these pathways to decarbonization? EIA, that's the Energy Information Administration, is a small agency within the Department of Energy. DOE is a very, very big agency. EIA is a small group of statisticians who do important surveys and analysis that are collecting data from all the different parts of the economy where energy is consumed and where energy is generated. And they have methodology to forecast energy, meaning looking out ahead from this year, 2025, looking out to 2050, and sort of each year from now until 2050, how are we going to get there? And you can see my notes that there was so much happening at the end of the Biden administration. There were so many perturbations to this system that they couldn't even do the annual forecast exercise. That took them a whole year just to absorb all that and figure out where we're headed. Now, of course, there's further change. The forecasts from 25 are not reflecting what's just been passed by the Trump administration, but of course they will next year. And when you go look into this, to these sources, you can find a long, long list of assumptions. There's lots of description about that. So this is a public resource. These are the kinds of things that you, as a student of the energy system and as a practitioner, are going to be accessing. And we'll show you how to find your way around the energy outlook. Go ahead to the next one, please. So as you join the program, supposing you do, I urge you to think about your goals and sort of what you're approaching in the program with this idea of a T. And what I'm trying to illustrate is that you will bring to us. You've come from a certain background. You're bringing to us some expertise already, and you may have focused in engineering or science or other STEM field as an undergraduate. You may be coming from economics or policy or another social science field, but that vertical is your expertise, and that's something you may want to continue to deepen at Brown. You may want to add to that with an adjacent slice that might be a new technical expertise, and that's great. But we also want you to think about that T, that bar across the top of the T, which is the perspective and the comprehension of how the energy system functions in society. So it's not just how to design, how to build, deploy, test, assess, all those technical aspects. It's how does that commodity, that function serve in society? How do the markets work? How does the policy process guide us towards innovation and change in that system? And so on. So you can read through these learning goals that I've laid out, but it's not just to get that technical piece, but also to have some idea of the practice. In other words, if you were to leave us after a year, which you would, graduating in just 1 year, 2 semesters of study, you might well join a team that's working on deploying a renewable energy system. But those teams are not just engineers, right? It includes others who do other scientific tasks, but also people who work on the legal, regulatory, and policy aspects of those projects. And those are very important too, incredibly important. Okay, let's go to the next slide and we'll get into some more detail with the program. I'll let you return to this at your leisure. This talks about where we think you'd probably be going when you leave the program. Let's go to the next slide for the moment. So here's the curriculum as it's being practiced today. Excuse me. We have several students who started the program this semester. This is fall 2025. So this is a brand new program. We're very excited about how we build it out. And part of it is we've designed some new courses specifically for this curriculum. Those engine courses you're seeing, 2705 Sustainable Energy, is a kind of review of all of the important energy technologies. This is the generation and the science and technology of those systems. Engine 2709 in the spring term there, that's a new course I've created about electrification and decarbonization. And that's really the forward-looking process of how does our electrical grid become low carbon or ultimately zero carbon? And then how are we going to use that decarbonized electricity in order to inject change in the rest of the economy? The ones highlighted here in red are courses where we're asking you to choose one of these. We want you to have, at a minimum, one course that spans into the economics and policy of energy transitions. And you can see what people are selecting from this year. These are taught not in the School of Engineering, but you can see as environmental science and studies or political science. These are Brown faculty, highly experienced people with expertise in published research in these areas of policy and politics, or we've also included investing. And each year there may be other things that can add to that list from across the Brown curriculum. So you would be looking at our specific custom courses from engineering, as well as being able to choose at least one of these, and then in your focus areas, even more, depending on your own particular interests. Let's go to the next slide then. This is, again, just pulling some more detail from Professor Andy Peterson's course, in 2705, which I mentioned. And you can see that this is very much an engineering course. This will have a cross list 1705 with Brown undergraduates. These are engineering concentrators, who've been studying chemical engineering at Brown. You would be joining other master's students and other graduate students, PhD students, doing these advanced engineering exercises. But you can see that this content also spans into the economics or techno-economics, if you will, of energy systems. And in the second half of his course, Professor Peterson has all of the students presenting on a particular energy system that they've studied. So this is part of your content. Let's go to the next one. And here's just an example of, if you will, the kind of summary of our energy system today. So every one of those types of energy generation that you'd be studying in that course, you can see along the left-hand panel here. You've probably seen diagrams like this. They're called Sankey diagrams. This comes from the Lawrence Livermore National Lab, and it shows the sources of energy, all of the sources of energy in summary form, as well as all of the uses of energy. And sort of big picture, where are we going is this diagram is going to acquire more and more renewable energy inputs to the electricity generation module. That's the orange box kind of in the middle there. So that, that will be solar, wind, hydro, and so on, squeezing out natural gas, squeezing out coal. And that has been happening. It's just underway. But as I mentioned, the state of California is an example. It's much further along. And, as that process continues, likewise, those end uses in residential, commercial, and industrial, as well as transportation, will be growing. And just, you can look at this and just see there's that very large contribution of petroleum inputs which means refined to gasoline, of course, which supplying most of our transportation system. And that entire light duty transportation sector can convert to electricity through EVs. Anyway, let's go to the next one. That's just the kind of the summary of sort of what you're aiming at. In my course, as I was saying, we'll dive deeper into how that process of beneficial electrification can take place. So again, forward looking, how will these pathways be mapped out? And you can see in the bottom on this slide, I'm talking about the hands-on project work that you'll do in the course where you use tools. These are mostly, not entirely, but mostly open source tools, freely available. And we'll also use a little bit sort of kind of industry standard grid simulation tools so that you'll be conversant, you will be fluent, you will be able to operate as an analyst on teams that are doing this kind of work. So that's part of the goal here is that your 1 year with us at Brown, you will come out with really a step increase in the skills that you can offer to a job you might be headed to. Okay, next slide, please. Here's my Sankey diagram, just like the one I showed you a couple slides ago of where we could be in 2050. And I've based this on EIA numbers for this year's forecasts. And the main reason to show this is just to say that, yes, if you make some reasonable assumptions, 2050, we could have made significant progress, but there's also still a long way to go. Notice in transportation, there's really just a small sliver of EVs have penetrated there. You can look at residential and commercial heating and cooling. Yes, it's substantial, but it's still, it's maybe half or a little bit more. So there's a long way to go. And this is saying, by some measures, people don't think we're going to be anywhere near net zero by the year 2050. So there's not just a lot of work to do, but there's a lot of obstacles. There's a lot of challenges ahead, and I think that's part of the reason to come to a program like this is we need smart, committed people who want to work on those challenges and help maybe change this diagram, something in the positive sense, change it to bring this transition ahead sooner. All right, let's go to the next slide. We have a plan. What I'm showing here, these two courses exist on paper but haven't been taught yet. And this year, we in the School of Engineering are planning to hire a new professor, a practitioner who comes from the energy modeling and energy policy space. This person most likely teach these two courses and perhaps others. These will be, requirements in future years as these courses come online. So a lot of the things I've been talking about this year, these are blended into the other courses that are being taught. But we hope to build out our capacity even further, as I said, by hiring experts specifically with the job of directing this program and teaching in this program. So let me start to wrap up here. We're going to look at a few more slides just to give you a little more kind of flavor of what could be in the content in these courses. Let's look at the next slide. This is very topical. This is just from earlier this summer. Not sure how many of you may know about how the energy markets work, but there's something called a capacity auction. Happens every year. PJM is one of the grid operators that deals with the Mid-Atlantic, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and so on as well. And that first bullet, I think even if you don't know much detail here, you can appreciate that if the grid operator comes out from an auction and tells his constituents, the state leadership of the dozen states that it services, that the capacity that used to cost $2 billion is now going to cost $14 billion. That's the kind of change that gets governors hopping mad and on the phone and asking people like, what on earth is going on here? So this was a big story. And one of the bottom line takeaways is in PJM right now, there's over 286 gigawatts of new resources, mostly renewables, meaning solar, wind, solar plus battery, mostly renewable energy projects that are waiting to come online. They're stuck, if you will, in the interconnection queue. That's where developer projects are being held while they're being studied. Who is doing those studies to figure out what's needed to reliably connect these new systems into our grid? That's you. Those are renewable energy engineers, and those are teams of people. There are electrical engineers. There are, as I said, others, regulators, lawyers. There are other types of engineers and scientists who are conducting those studies. So you can see the huge backlog here. 286 gigawatts is more than the total auction amount in this interconnect in PJM. So you can just get a sense that there's a lot happening right now that's kind of a dysfunction in the system. And that's partly why we're here, to help bring along a new generation of technical and policy experts who can help get us through this logjam. Um, okay, next slide, please. Just another shout out to the kinds of tools that you'd be using in the project work in your courses. National Renewable Energy Lab, NREL, has a lot of analytical tools and large data sets that you can access. There is significant complexity in these systems, but we're not going to have to reinvent the wheel. We can access a lot of this stuff. And, a typical policy question is based on the real network that's at hand that we're dealing with. On the right, I'm picturing New England. This is the independent system operator in New England, ISO New England. But based on what's really there on the ground today, what would happen if we introduced such and such a new resource or made a policy change? And these kinds of calculations span from, engineering answers to, what are the impacts on emissions and what are the impacts on economy? So you can see it's really, in that sense, it really crosses the disciplines. Let's do one more just as we close this out. Next slide, please. What's coming? I mentioned towards the beginning about solar plus batteries has become very big. That we had that moment last year in California where for the first time, batteries were the biggest contributor to the grid. But the current generation of batteries they're only going to go so far, right? Those are mostly lithium-ion batteries with 4-hour storage times. If you can afford it, you could get more and more batteries to get you to 8 hours, but it's really not economical. And what we need is called long duration energy storage, LDES. And this is just a slide from the Department of Energy showing the kinds of ideas that might get us there. And so it's not known yet what's going to win, what's going to be economical. There's a startup company, Form Energy, that's doing an iron air battery. You may have heard of them. That could get to possibly 100-hour storage. There are flow batteries. That's another solution. So we're talking now about technical solutions, things that are real in the lab, are becoming real in the sort of the demonstration space. You can think of that as like prototype or advanced prototyping. And then the next step is, can they make it into real commercial impact? So there will be pilot projects and then, commercial rollouts. And so this generation of technology is gonna bring with it its own perturbations to our system. How will policy help drive this? And what do we need in terms of policy and rules in the markets? How can these systems be fairly compensated? How can we harvest their value for this work? So with that, I think it's time for me to skip ahead a bit so we can get to your questions. I'm just going to show you briefly on the next slide the kinds of courses that are available to you to choose from for your focus area. And this is part of an important idea of the curriculum, that there's only going to be 3 requirements on you, 3 out of 8 requirements on you, like you must take these 3 courses. The other ones, we're saying at least 3 of your remaining 5, you need to come up with a focus area. And it's based on the skills you have to begin with and the skills you're trying to add as you come through our program at Brown. And these are just some possible ideas. Like you could say, I'm a specialist in materials for energy applications, but you could say something else. You could say, I'm a specialist in battery storage markets for a particular region. I mean, this is really up to you to help define what is it you would like to be doing in this program. And if you're not seeing that represented here, it doesn't mean you can't do it because there are many, many courses in the Brown curriculum. The next slide, please, just shows some more of the possible resources you could be tapping to deal with economic issues, to deal with the design of markets, to deal with impacts on health, if that's your interest, or impacts on agriculture. You may not be seeing that here, but we do have people with expertise in all those areas. And so we will work with you to help put that program together. And that's sort of part of the beauty of this flexible approach. And one more slide from me, or I guess two more slides, but this one just calls out that if you look through all those courses at Brown and you still don't see the things that are most appropriate for your interests, there's another avenue here, which is we have a cross-registration agreement with Harvard School up the road from us in Cambridge, Mass. And these are some examples of courses from their curriculum that might be relevant to your interests. And you can register for any Faculty of Arts and Sciences courses at Harvard. Harvard grad students can register in Brown courses. So that's a further avenue for collaboration and for flexibility. Okay, next one is the last slide from me. Thanks for your patience here. I just want to mention, as I close it out, that we are, of course, in the Brown University School of Engineering, which is full of very capable, very accomplished researchers across all of these fields of engineering that you're seeing listed here, as well as entrepreneurship and tech innovation. So we have spanning from fundamentals to applied research across many, many fields. And although 1 year, 2 semesters is not a long time, if you have a serious research interest, especially if it's something you're already engaged with, there's a good chance you can find a collaborator here at Brown and continue that. And with that, I want to say it was a pleasure speaking to you. I look forward to hearing your questions. And of course, anyone who wants to reach out to me separately online via email, I welcome that. Welcome to speak with you further. And I'll turn it back to Victoria to close it out.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Rod. If we want to go to the next slide. I want to talk a little bit about the career and professional development at Brown. One of the things that makes Brown's master's programs unique is we have master's specific student resources available for folks in all of our programs. So we understand you're not with us for as long as a PhD candidate might be or an undergraduate student. So we have special specific resources at Brown through the Division of Masters and Professional Programs to help meet those needs. So we have these layers of support. Your program is an excellent resource. You have professors of the practice, faculty who've spent time in industry, who've gotten PhDs, if you want to go that route as well, who you can use as a resource. We also have the Division of Masters and Professional Programs where we have STEM specific career counseling. We have dedicated career counselors there to work specifically with our master's students, either individually or through the departments. And then we have really excellent alumni resources through Brown University's career department. So lots of different ways you can approach career and professional development. We put on workshops, one-on-one counseling, everything from when you start trying to figure out what your pathway might be all the way to when you're negotiating a job package. And you're with Brown forever, right? When you graduate, so you'll have access to these resources long after you leave the university. So if we want to go to the next slide. Like I said earlier, we have these master's specific career resources. You can check out what's going on at masterscareers.brown.edu. You can see sort of what the offerings are like, especially now that the semester is underway. You should really be able to get a good snapshot of what might be available when you come to Brown, hopefully in the spring or the fall of next year. So if we want to go to the next slide. Some career paths for sustainable energy students. There's a lot of really great options with this master's degree program that you can speak with our career folks about, as well as folks in the department. So if you're interested in any of these fields, these are some of the areas that we see our students having success in. I should also say that we have a really great student services arm of our student affairs wing with the School of Professional Studies and the Department of Master's Program. So really a lot of great folks who are there to help serve you on a one-on-one basis to make sure that you're successful in the program and helping you sort of maintain these paths. So if we want to go to the next slide. Some contact information as well. Like Rod said, we're available to help. I am here if you need a point of contact to connect you with any of Brown resources, whether that be contacting somebody in the program or trying to get information from folks across Brown University. Folks in the department are there, of course. We've got, of course, Rod on the call, who's the academic director for the program, really an excellent resource if you have any questions about the program specifically. But then we have in the School of Engineering a lot of really wonderful people who are there to help guide you through the process. So even right now, we've got Ann Wang on the call who works with the School of Engineering in student affairs. So really just a team of folks who are here to help you, not just through the application process, but also once you actually matriculate at Brown. So if we want to go to the next slide. Definitely stay in connection with us. If you need more information about the application requirements, you can look at the website graduateprograms.brown.edu. If you have questions about the application process, you can reach out to our admission team at masters_admissions@brown.edu. I will also put my email address in the chat. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to me directly. But that being said, I think we're ready to answer some questions. So if folks want to start adding those questions to the Q&A, I know some submitted some in advance that we'll cover as well, but we'll get started with that in just a moment. And I just added my email to the webinar chat for everybody. So a question that one person asked in advance of the session was about funding. Rod, do you have any information about funding for the program? Are there scholarships available? And then I can also talk a little bit about graduate financial aid.
Yeah, thanks. So, as I mentioned, this is a brand new program. At this time, we don't have scholarship funds. It is possible that as time goes on, maybe in the next year, there would be some. Typically, those are quite limited. So, that's unfortunately the case, but there are some options that you can consider, including it may be possible for you to find a TA position or even an RA position in the School of Engineering. Again, you're here for a short time. You don't have a lot of chance to establish relationships with faculty, but that may be possible. I'll also mention, since the question has come up, if you come to school in Rhode Island, where we are, the state of Rhode Island has a clean energy internship program, which is something that's funded by the state. This is not a Brown program that I'm referring you to, but one of our students already in this program has gotten an internship through that. And the benefit at the student, of course, is getting paid and having a job in this industry that you're interested in already, but benefit to the company that hires you is the state of Rhode Island is paying that salary. So that's if you're interested in that, that's something you could look into. And Victoria may have a few other things that might help. We know it is a lot of tuition plus your living expenses here. And it's part of why this program is just 1 year. We want to get you, upgrade your skills and get you into the job market quickly.
Absolutely. So one of the things I'd encourage folks to do is to be in contact with our graduate financial aid folks. I will plug our upcoming session that we have with the graduate financial aid office. We talk about financing your degree. They'll go in depth about sort of loan eligibility and things like that. I will say that the vast majority of our master's students are self-funded. There isn't a ton of funding available across any of the programs. That's not something that's unique to sustainable energy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a link to the graduate funding website into the Zoom chat, and then folks can peruse that. And then also I will put in a link to be able to register for our upcoming sessions. Um, about funding. And then we also have a ton of sessions about like student life at Brown. We do a deep dive into career and professional development. That might be of interest to folks. I would definitely encourage everybody to join us for those sessions as they have more questions. And those links are in the chat.
So I see a question coming in about prerequisite courses. Are there any prerequisite courses? So, our statement is that you should have preparation equivalent to that engineering undergraduate curriculum. So, if you've done cell biology, for example, you probably have a lot of that because you have some mathematical background, you probably have some university level chemistry and physics, and those things are going to get you there. So we can try to address, on a case by case basis. But so that's what we're looking at is, yes, we do expect you to have some STEM background. It doesn't mean you have to have a STEM degree. You could be an economics concentrator, but we're looking for some of that analytical background. Another question coming in, does it affect my application if all three of the letters of recommendation are academic? That's fine. And I think, we would like your recommenders to know your work well. If those are the people who do, that's what we wanted. If you had a supervisor and a work experience or a research experience, outside of your academic work, that'd be great too. Okay, so it's we want the people who have seen your work and know you well.
Another question that came in before the session started was about successful GPAs for applicants. And I wanted to see if Rod, you wanted to weigh in a little bit on sort of what a successful academic record looks like GPA wise.
Yeah. Um, Right. So we're Brown University. We're, as you know, extremely selective at the undergraduate level. At the graduate level, we are still looking for excellent students. Really, the bar is just as high, but the difference here is the number of applicants is far, far fewer. Okay. So I think you all know, like at the undergrad level, we have tens of thousands of good qualified students who can never get in because there just aren't enough spots. That is not the case here. And, we are going to be able to admit qualified students, I think, in our applicant pool. So your question is, something like, is there a cutoff on GPAs? No, but we expect you to be an excellent student. And what that means is it's a holistic review process. I don't want to put a certain number out there, but I think you know what that means. You need to be in the, among the best students from your cohorts. You need to have come from a strong program, or you need to show that your performance, was an outlier in a program that's not a strong program. So we will look at everything that you give us. We will read all of those programs carefully. There's no arbitrary cutoff, and there's no throwing out folders. Every single one of your applications is read and evaluated. If you want to speak to me individually about your particular record, I can give you more insight into where you might stand. Hope that's helpful.
Yeah, and I think also just if there is context that's important to your academic record, telling us that is really important too, right? Like if there was a discrete period of time for a particular personal reason that you had problems, that's stuff that we want to know, right? That's important context to your application that we would want to know, versus just sort of submitting your transcript and letting us connect the dots erroneously. And there's space in the application to be able to do that for sure.
Yeah, I would also add that if you have some low marks in a field that's kind of irrelevant to what we're doing here, that would not be as big a concern as if you had low marks in things that were much more directly related, like your math science background, or if you've already taken coursework that's specifically related to renewable energy. Those would be things where we really want to see top marks, which makes sense, right? So hopefully that fits with your your motivations in asking this.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I think that's it for questions. We've answered all of the ones that were submitted and before and during the session. So thanks everybody for joining us, and thank you, Rod, for answering questions and presenting about the program. If folks have any other questions, then they're more than welcome to reach out. We've provided a bunch of email addresses. So that being said, have a great day and enjoy. Bye, everyone.
Thank you all. Great to have you here. Take care.